So I wanted to start off here with, I mean, the thing that really Gen Z is talking about, and certain
Mhm.
types of millennials are talking about, which is the TikTok ban.
Right.
Um, I, I guess in my marketer brain, I just thought of TikTok as one of these other platforms just to distribute content. I did not realize that people had such a deep-seated um, uh, tie to the platform. Right? I thought it was gonna be like Vine when Vine went away, or Flutter, or any of these different things. I didn't think it would be a big deal. I was wrong. So I'd love to just play a quick clip here to set the tone for what's going on here from NBC News.
A reversal concerning one of America's most popular apps. The White House saying they will not implement the ban on TikTok, set to go into effect this Sunday, according to two administration officials.
I really feel like this is happening because of us.
The fight isn't over. It's just going to be extended.
The battle over the future of the app has gone all the way to the Supreme Court, but now the administration says it won't enforce massive fines on the companies who provide users access to TikTok. It's a stark shift from when the law was passed with massive bipartisan support, the president signing it into law.
It feels like we're losing, a community.
Now, sources say Democratic lawmakers called the White House asking for intervention. And President-elect Trump, who once opposed the app, has signaled he'll intervene.
I'm going to save TikTok.
But national security officials still warned that TikTok's Chinese parent company ByteDance could steal American user data or manipulate content shown in the app, which TikTok denies. Then FBI Director Christopher Wray had this warning, speaking with Lester last year.
We have to sort of step back and say, who is TikTok? And ultimately, it all boils down to the hand, which is a matter of Chinese law, of the Chinese government and the Chinese Communist Party.
It all comes just days before Mr. Trump's inauguration. According to three sources, TikTok CEO Shou Chew is expected to attend, along with the world's three richest men, tech titan Elon Musk, Amazon's Jeff Bezos, and Meta's Mark Zuckerberg. Just last night, President Biden took aim at big tech and what he called the dangerous concentration of power among a select few.
I'm equally concerned about the potential rise of a tech industrial complex. The truth is smothered by lies told for power and for profit.
And Savannah, back to TikTok. We're still waiting to hear from the Supreme Court as to whether it upholds the law in the first place.
That's right, Lester. And in fact, the Supreme Court just announced they will have rulings tomorrow. That last minute notice suggests there's a good chance we get that TikTok ruling since that Sunday deadline is quickly approaching. Lester?
All right. So we wouldn't have a debate about this at all, or any conversation at all, if it wasn't for Trump saying on the campaign trail that he's going to save TikTok, right? And what I can't wrap my head around, and this is where I want to find the trade in here, because what I can't wrap my head around is that both sides of the political aisle in the United States and all the different candidates seem to be either, depending on when you talk to them, on the side or not on the side of TikTok being banned. And I can't make heads or tails about this. So I just want to first lead it off with you. Like, do you actually believe this ban will follow through? And would that be the basis of a trade, or do you think that they're going to reverse it?
That's a tough one. I mean, in general, it feels like not knowing the ruling from the Supreme Court yet obviously puts us in a position of not knowing the true outcome yet. How that ban is actually implemented has been a question for a while now. That huge fines would be imposed to the App Store owners, Apple and Google, to even access the app. So they would expect them to pull it down from the stores. But it also means that the app itself would still be accessible if you already have it installed on your device. Then it's a question of whether or not the data itself can be accessible by the users, like through AWS and American providers. So how far they go to actually enforce that ban is really kind of the question. The ban may go through, is my point, but may not actually matter because people can still access it and use it and, still gain, monetary reward from it for some time before it actually makes its way to being inaccessible. Right. But if Trump goes out of his way to not uphold the ban, then it may still be accessible in the app stores. So I feel like no matter what the outcome is tomorrow from the court's ruling, the enforcement of it is really kind of the gray area in my mind. What are your thoughts?
So to that point, I just want to pull up this this article that was coming around this week. All right. So it reads, in the run-up to the election, Donald Trump, this is from The Guardian, can Donald Trump circumvent a TikTok ban? In the run-up to the election, Donald Trump made a plea to his followers. For all those that want to save TikTok in America, vote Trump. He posted to his Truth Social account in September. Since then, he's been working to make good on that pledge. He hosted TikTok CEO's Shushu at his Mar-a-Lago estate in December, implored the U.S. Supreme Court to delay a TikTok ban, and he's now reportedly considering an executive order to postpone the app's disappearance. Chu is slated to join Trump at his inauguration in what appears to be a show of solidarity with an embattled executive. Continues, despite the Supreme Court upholding the ban, all is not over for TikTok. According to legal scholars, as president, Trump could intervene. The ban is scheduled to go into effect on Sunday, and Trump will be sworn into office the very next day. Postponing or reversing the TikTok ban could hand him an early political win. If all he wants is to buy some time to save TikTok, then he can do that. All it takes is simply doing nothing. All he has to do is not enforce the law vigorously right away, and the status quo can carry on. Finish in. The Justice Department can say, we're not going to prosecute every single crime. We're going to prosecute the ones we think are important. And we just happen to think that the TikTok ban is not as important as other things. The way the TikTok ban works is that rather than targeting TikTok or ByteDance, it will punish the companies that distribute and host the app. That means Google and Apple could see billion-dollar fines if they continue to offer TikTok in their app stores. But legal scholars say Trump could indicate he won't go after them either. This, to me, is bananas.
It's breaking the law legally. That's what I'm hearing.
Exactly. So there's so many levels to this that I find to be just, I can't even wrap my head around it. One, the idea that we're even talking about banning an app, right? And so we've had this whole conversation in the United States about that the social media platforms are the public space, the town square, and that we shouldn't have a squash of ideas. And whether you wherever you land on that, the idea was never that, we should ban Twitter, we should ban Facebook, we should ban these things. The argument was always more that we should, prosecute things more specifically, or moderate it more, or censor it, or whatever it is that people are doing. So this complete banning thing seems to be, especially from some of the people who are advocating it, seems to be like anathema to the idea of what Americans think about speech at all. So it seems strange in that effect. Then on top of that, the argument that the article is making is that they could just say, okay, well, we won't prosecute this, which feels so weird and terrible. It's like, wait, so the laws are supposed to be there. You like the legislator just put the laws on the books for when they want to use it.
Right.
I didn't realize that's what we're explicitly saying the law is for. So that's strange to me. And then finally, that the idea that these multi-trillion-dollar, billion to trillion-dollar companies are going to be like, let's risk multi-billion-dollar fines to make the president happy. This all seems very kingship, monarchy. What is happening over here? I don't get it. And it's posted in a reputable magazine as sort of like a matter of fact, with no addressing this contradiction of ideas here. As an American, where do you see this?
Well, I guess what's interesting about this one is that there isn't a lack of precedence here. We've banned Chinese products in the past into America, but it's usually been the technology that's been banned, right? So like Huawei and ZTE, and how do you pronounce it? It's Xiaomi or Xiaomi, which is another technology provider that was trying to import products into the United States. These were all owned by the Chinese government or had some part in the Chinese government, and ultimately were banned. Lawsuits were imposed and overturned. Some were upheld, but this always ends up making its way into American technology without really our awareness of it, right? They're the chip makers. They find their way into Qualcomm devices, or they find those products are made in other types of devices that we buy here in the United States. This feels a little bit different because we've connected with each other. American citizens have connected with each other through an app that happens to be owned in some small part by a Chinese-owned entity, but is ultimately a Singaporean company that has a US entity here in the United States. So it gets really complex in my mind because it doesn't feel quite the same picture. It's not quite the exact same structure of why we've banned things in the past. So, it doesn't feel unusual that we're banning a Chinese product, but it doesn't exactly feel like a Chinese product either. And on the same side of things, the threat that I think they're describing isn't exactly clear either. For the most part, it's Americans talking to Americans on TikTok. It is Americans promoting to Americans on TikTok. We're sure we're selling Chinese products through the TikTok shop, but it very much feels like an American product, an American social media environment, and I don't sense the external threat that I think they're trying to define.
That's right. Plus, on top of that, the reaction to it, where it's not that the communities that have existed on the platform, like you said, Americans talking to Americans, it's not like they're facing this ban going, okay, we have to find an American app that we can go ahead and have our communities on.
Mm-hmm.
We like these features, but it's not happening. Let's go to YouTube Shorts. Let's go to Instagram Reels. That's not what they're saying. They're moving towards RedNote, an even more explicitly Chinese app, and they're ostensibly saying that that's where they're finding more freedom. And I find that to be, if I was a lawmaker, if I was a thought leader in the United States, I'd be like, oh, we've sent the wrong message. Like, if I was honest to goodness, my goal was to make it so that the people were well served, I'd be like, oh, well, we completely misunderstood. Like, what we wanted to do was help people, and they think that we're against them. That is not the conversation.
No, and obviously that's the biggest twist of irony this week, is to see droves of TikTok users suddenly deciding that they're going to install RedNote, which I think represents more of the defined threat that the US government is trying to explain than TikTok. It's a worse app. I think it not only has clear ownership by the Chinese government, but it as far as security analysts are concerned, it is an overreaching app far more than TikTok is by itself in terms of the type of data that it collects. So, we're making this choice ostensibly voluntarily to move to an app that puts us in a worse security position than we did before, which makes and begs the question, why ban TikTok in the first place?
Exactly. Because they should ban all of it together. That was essentially the point. Okay, so the reason why we're bringing this up is that it sets up let's call it the fundamentals for the trade. I thought it was very interesting. So the Supreme Court came out and said that they weren't going to undo the ban for TikTok a couple of hours ago.
That's right. Okay.
And so before that, or even now, we have these bet markets that exist on Kalshi and on Polymarket, where you can bet on whether or not it'll be banned. You can bet on whether or not it'll be banned by a certain date, a certain time, and that sort of thing. So let me just pull that up real quick, because I thought that was super, super interesting. Because I don't think that it's, to me, for people who just complaining about a thing or making a statement about a thing, I don't really care about that. I care about if this is something that you have an opinion for, either for or against, put your money on it. Like, take an actual bet. And you can take a bet for or against this, for the ban or against the ban if you want to. So something here I thought that was pretty interesting was on the bet markets, as of this morning, we were in a situation where if you were to bet that the ban would take place, you could make, let's say, 70% profit. And if you on your bet, and if you bet that the ban wasn't going to happen, you could double your money. And you could have done that all this week and profited today. And so I think that there's two types of people that I would want them to understand that these markets exist in this sort of way. We saw this during the election. You can sort of express you can vote for what your preference is by participating in these markets. And you could, in a sense, get some sort of profit, even if the outcome that you wanted, you could basically hedge. You can get a benefit, even if the thing that that you didn't want to happen happens. And so I love the idea that some people who might have wanted TikTok not to be banned could still have made 70% of their money, or even more, depending on when they got in on the markets, making the bet that it would be banned. So, for example, you can still right now on Polymarket, you can go to one of the bets that are there is, will Trump create? No, so it's the wrong one. Let's go TikTok. And there's one here for will Trump save TikTok in his first week? And this has been steadily going up, which I find very interesting. It's such a your finger on the pulse of what's going on and where people are putting their money. And so you can bet right now, if you bet $1,000 that yes, Trump will save TikTok, you can make 31% on that if you bet now, and then no, you can make 144%. I find this all so fascinating because to me it's like sports betting. I could take it or leave it. I'm not a big sports ball fan, but I love
event-based betting. Yeah,
exactly.
Different kind of situation.
Just absolutely fantastic. And so I would wish that people got together, the people who either want one thing or another, and they got together and they use these platforms and said, hey, we're going to push these numbers up. We're going to support the outcome that we actually want as a way of demonstrating to other people, and then to show, well, that might actually backfire now that I think about it, because then you can take the opposite side of the bet, and the people that you're against you actually make more money. But I love this type of game where if you're worried about it and you want to make some cash on it, that you could have bet on it and made not an insignificant amount of money.
Well, on the flip side, the other issue here is that the obvious trade would be to short TikTok. Now, of course, it's not a publicly traded company. There's no direct kind of proxy to it. There's no American depository receipt. That said, the companies that I would be interested in keeping an eye on here would be companies like Google, because of its ownership of YouTube, as most of these TikTokers flock over to YouTube or even move there for the first time, because many creators on TikTok had really kind of built their audience on TikTok first and really didn't have a presence on these other platforms. And so I'm expecting there will be a rise there in content creation, potentially some upside down the road, and of course some immediate upside just from the news. I mean, I think Google was up 1.62% today, so that's a sign that the market's already kind of looking at this as some potential. Meta has some obvious upside as more people move to Instagram. Snapchat could be another potential one. But I'm also interested in keeping an eye on SoftBank, because I think they have a small or fairly large, not an insignificant holding of ByteDance, which obviously they indirectly benefit from, as many of their holdings would contribute to their performance. So not just TikTok alone, but I would expect some potential for a short sell there. Amazon potentially could be impacted by this from a revenue perspective if TikTok goes away, because most of TikTok is run on Amazon's AWS environment, and Cloudflare is also fronting it as well. But in the long run, I'd be looking at the impact of other Chinese ADRs that kind of fit into this category, because I don't assume it stops with TikTok here. If we feel like enough Americans are using products, or the government is on a quest here to try to restrict as much Chinese commerce in America as possible, then it's going to be interesting to keep an eye on companies like Alibaba or even Tencent that have listings in the United States that may or may not last very long if it comes down to it.
Well, in your list, then Meta is the one that seems the most interesting to me, because with Zuckerberg's recent appearance on Rogan, basically making his whole culpa, whether you believe him or not, to me, it makes no difference. If he's stating that what he wants to do is to be a platform where the very types of people that we're talking about on these platforms on TikTok would want to go to, then they might start telegraphing that they'll change features and they'll change the behavior, and they'll try to get something more TikTok-like, and that to me would be pretty bullish, because
sure.
I don't know that. Well, I don't see anything that suggests to me that the people who are the TikTok creators actually have like a passion for China, and that's why they're on TikTok. No. They're on TikTok because they were making a livelihood. It had the features that they want. It was a great algorithm, service content. All that is absolutely true. And they weren't getting that from the American companies.
Right.
They weren't getting it.
Yeah.
And so if Meta decides, if Zuckerberg decides, okay, no, we want to get that market, hey, all for it. More power to that. I would love to see,
Sure.
I would love to see TikTok get unbanned, and I would like to see 3 more competitors to it show up that are just as good in quality.
I would agree with that. And I think that there are some open source competitors out there that are going to be worth keeping an eye on, that could represent, maybe a more holistic way to solve this problem. Because I think much of the concern is that data and data privacy is the legitimate concern here. And data in the hands of the Chinese government is the national security concern we have. But ironically, I would argue that Meta has far more of a documented history of data privacy violations than TikTok does. So, we can move to these platforms, but we haven't really solved the problem. It would be nice if we had a TikTok competitor that was open source. It was clear what the algorithm was doing. It's clear where the data is owned and where it lives. And I'd be looking for that as much as anything else. But in general, obviously the thing that frustrates me is the fact that TikTok appeared to create a better attention economy for new content creators that were struggling to gain traction on these other platforms. So sure, in theory, they can move from TikTok to other platforms, but I just don't know if they're going to reap the same reward. The fascinating thing that TikTok created for all these creators is a real livelihood that they were struggling to create elsewhere.
That's exactly right. And I find that the like you just mentioned, and the irony of they're like, well, we have to get rid of this platform because they're mining your information and they're using the information against you, whatever. And you go, well, you guys have been doing the same thing too. Like we're damned if we do, damned if we don't. Can we just have the town square where we can actually talk?
Sure.
And when I see stuff like I forget the name of the new SNL cast member, Jane Wicki. I don't know if you watch SNL, but I started watching her on TikTok, I don't know, a year, 2 years ago, and she was so funny. And the way I was like, oh, this girl's she's gonna make it. And to see her move from there all the way up to the SNL cast member and see no China in there whatsoever. Like I go, no, this was a honest to goodness. She went from, she had no visibility to on a major TV show in about a year. So I think I want that churn to still happen. That's the promise of these platforms, and we have not been getting that from YouTube. We have not been getting that from any of these other platforms we're normally used to.